and welcome to Season 1 of the new series Teaching Matters on the PsychSessions Network. This series is co-hosted by Dr. Rob McEntarffer, who serves as an assessment specialist for the Lincoln Public School System in Lincoln, Nebraska, and me, Eric Landrum, your humble podcast servant from Boise State University and co-founder of PsychSessions. Rob and I, we had a blast recording these chats, 12 episodes in all in Season 1, including this brief introductory episode. Episodes 2 through 12 range in length from 16 minutes to 35 minutes each. So they are meant to be bite-sized, suitable for binge listening if you wish. Oh, we ramble quite a bit, and at times you might laugh with us or laugh at us. Honestly, we don't care which. Please know that the viewpoints expressed here represent Rob and Eric's own opinions respectively, and not the opinions of their individual employers. As we discuss teaching matters, we hope these conversations will be provocative and thought-provoking. If you have ideas for future episode topics or want to comment, most podcast outlets allow for comments, or you can email us at psychsessionspodcast@gmail.com. Now, I will put that email address in the liner notes for each episode, show notes, but here it is again, all one word, psychsessionspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy Season 1 of Teaching Matters.
What that makes me think of is we've got some friends in a group that we belong to who are interested in the writing topic of lessons learned during the pandemic. And I think they're narrowing in on teaching, pedagogical, that sort of thing, lessons learned. But it might branch out, and somebody should also be thinking about life lessons learned as well. I'm sorry you've had to learn so many life lessons so recently, but it's a worthwhile topic to think about. I think my brain has been resisting for a while any sort of, I've been so mad about what I see as cruel, sometimes deliberate disorganization that happened during the pandemic. I think my brain's resisted thinking about any bright spots or advantages or good things that might come out of this. But I think I'm finally ready to start thinking about, and especially within teaching, it's worth thinking about what we've learned that we want to carry through.
I think there's a number of conversational paths there. Part of them, I think, are bigger societal changes, and which we don't really have to go there, but just to touch on it briefly, I think about, will we ever handshake again?
Yeah.
The kind of traditional greeting that we've had all of our adult lives.
Yeah.
If you think about it, it's a prime transmission of germs, potentially with strangers. I think I'm going to have to come up with a protocol, and that sounds really formal, so that when I see my friends again, hopefully at conferences, what will be the signal for, is it okay for me to give you a hug? And maybe I got to think this through. In some ways, a hug might be safer than a handshake. We're not touching hands, but maybe you're getting close enough where if you're the aerosols exchange, maybe it's less safe, but it's so brief, maybe it's not a risk. Who in the world thought we would be worried about that?
Yeah.
In 2021 or 2022. And Rob, I got to tell you, I'm not excited to go to conferences. And I know many of our colleagues are chomping at the bit to go to conferences and see their friends and receive that professional development face-to-face that we all enjoy. And I just got to tell you, I would love to see those folks in that setting, but getting on an airplane, even if it's middle seats are unoccupied, I'm not thrilled with that possibility.
Yeah, and I think it's tied in with classroom conversations too. Maybe some of what we've learned is what parts of remote learning are okay, maybe not easier or more effective, but at least as effective, or we can modify to make them okay, adequate for most people, versus what parts are really hard. I don't love the term value added, but that's the term that springs to mind. Like what's the value added of face-to-face? And I think that relates to conferences too. I was pretty reluctant. I resisted several virtual conferences early on because I just was not excited about doing it. After I did my first one, I just had to grudgingly admit that it worked fine. I was able to tune in, no technical problems. I could see the speaker extremely well. I could hear the speaker extremely well. I had better access to their materials than I did at in person conferences. I felt I had better access to questions. I thought more people were getting more questions answered. So I don't love this conclusion because there's part of me emotionally that's very attached to in person conferences. But I'm afraid there might be a hell of a lot of value added to virtual conferences.
And then it's a yes and all of that. And think about the added amount of equity and
Oh, yeah.
inclusivity that
Yeah.
now you can add people. I know there's an internet bandwidth issue, but now you can include people from all over the world who
Mm-hmm.
don't have to travel. You can
Yeah.
include people from institutions that may be financially strapped that
Yeah.
can't afford travel budgets, but they can afford an internet bandwidth budget. And now there still may be registration fees,
Yeah.
but there's not travel and hotel and ground transportation and
Yep.
a per diem for food. And so I think maybe levels the playing field is a cliche that's overused here, but I think there's a real benefit. And I want to take it where you started that comment. COVID-19, the pandemic, maybe makes us think about the benefits, but I think higher ed was already going in that direction even before. I think the pandemic may have put the spotlight.
Mm.
We were already starting to be challenged by the for profits and by the MOOCs. The whole notion of the lecture style in an auditorium with the multiple choice testing,
Mm-hmm.
of the classic 150 years of higher ed may not be the one and only method. And the for profits, the MOOCs, the active learning, the innovative technology integration
Yeah.
started to creep in. And then all of a sudden, the pandemic made essentially everyone pivot.
Mm-hmm.
And now, just like you said, people are starting to realize this ain't so bad.
Yeah. And finishing out the previous thought and then adding on to it related to what you just said, when you talked about increasing equity and access, just speaking for high school K-12 psychology teachers for a second, there are a bunch of high school psych teachers who would love to go to a bunch of teaching with psychology conferences, and it would never happen. TOPS has done this, STP's done this, other groups have tried to be very inviting to high school teachers, and the answer is invariably, there's no way my district's going to pay for that, because they won't, because it's K-12. But virtual, boy, it is an opportunity to get high school teachers to those places. Yeah.
I know you've got to follow up to that.
Yeah.
And I think what we need to do is that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be audio only with psych sessions, but we need to probably have a video curation of those conferences with
Yeah.
permission, of course, and maybe even curate not only the keynotes from those, but maybe the best snippets of them. And I know, and obviously I understand your focus on K-12, but also those community
Oh,
college
yeah. Yeah.
instructors
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
that access. And there are 4-year privates and 4-year colleges and universities that also struggle to have those same travel budgets. These are resources that we should make available to everyone. And I get it. Maybe if you're a member of STP, it's behind a firewall. It's embargoed for members only for the first 6 months. So there's a members only benefit. But then after 6 months, it's open to everybody on the planet. I know you had another point you wanted to make.
No, that's a great idea. A lot of our professional learning, professional development ain't great, and there's an opportunity for quality research-based researchers and practitioners to provide a bunch of high quality stuff. The other point I wanted to jump off on was when we were talking about value added and remote versus in-person instruction. I wonder if one possible frame for that or organizing scheme for that. So Steve Chu recently put out that paper on cognitive challenges of teaching. One of the things that I appreciate about that is I think it's a powerful framework to think broadly and inclusively about a lot of aspects of the incredibly complex task of teaching. And that can translate into this value added for in-person versus remote. So maybe one of the things that we're figuring out is for the cognitive challenges of teaching, for encoding and retrieval practice and deep processing, maybe we can figure out how to do that online, maybe sometimes better than we can in person. But there are those other cognitive challenges, and we're seeing this in our district, specifically some of the motivation challenges, where I think the in person has a lot to do with motivation for learning. So, one of the struggles that we're finding with K 12, with students who have to be all remote because their parents are choosing it or because of medical reasons, is teachers are just having a bear of a time motivating some students, not all students, but a significant number of students, just to get stuff done. And what I hear from teachers is if they were here with me, I know that I could work with them one on one and we could get this done, but they're not, and I can't.
So do you think that so first off, my tendency would be to believe those high school
Yeah,
teachers.
yeah,
I don't think that's hubris. I
right,
think I
right.
have a tendency to believe that. But I guess the gentle question I would ask would be, will those teachers and will the school districts support that students who don't do the work will actually receive failing grades? And
That's a complicated issue, and it depends on when you ask. Fourth quarter last year during the pandemic, it was all bets were off, and there wasn't a lot of grading consequences. This year, it's quite different, and we've got our act together more, and there is actual grading being done, and credits earned, and things, and credits lost, and things like that.
yeah, and students who are struggling with either physical health or mental health challenges,
Mhm.
obviously, we don't want to put them in the penalty box and make
Yeah,
things worse.
yeah,
But at the same time, we all as educators have accountability
right.
that students need to perform, and they shouldn't advance to whatever next level or earn whatever credential without demonstrating the knowledge or skills or abilities related to it.
Yeah, you and I know how vitally important it is to assess and then also use some data for accountability in all aspects of education, and this is one of them. Uh,
And not every student, not every person's gonna be motivated during a pandemic or outside of a pandemic to, I wanna work on my social studies homework or
right.
my history homework or my math homework, and I get it that states have laws that
Yeah.
students have to go to school to a certain age, and, we have to follow those laws. I understand that as well, but maybe in some cases, it's not in the best interest to force someone to do that in such a way that there's going to cause mental or physical harm.
Yeah, and it's a puzzle, right? Motivation. It was never my favorite chapter to teach. It just always seemed like a big mess. Motivation theory seemed like the motivation chapter seemed like a big mess to me, and I had trouble having it cohere. But in Steve's paper, when he talks about the all the challenges, the teaching and motivation is one of them. If one of the puzzles we're trying to work through is what did we learn during the pandemic about teaching and learning that we want to continue, Steve's paper is a good reminder to me to not just focus on my favorite part, which is the cognitive part. Got to look across what did we learn about motivation? What did we learn about emotion? What did we learn about relationships? What did we learn about all those challenges? And one of those challenges is that students are motivated in different ways, in different contexts, by different things. And the puzzle of the pandemic is part of that. And we're finding that I think that's one of the major challenges in K 12.
I think maybe you just very wisely unlocked part of the puzzle, meaning that when the teacher has the student in the classroom with her or with him, the teacher is much more likely to unlock the individual puzzle for that student when they're present.
Yeah.
But online, interacting with a grid of 25 or 30 squares, it's very difficult for any K 12 teacher because you're not seeing the daily emotions of body language and facial expressions when a student mutes themselves or blanks their screen. You don't blank your screen when you're in a classroom, when you're going to homeroom, or for the older students when they're moving from class to class.
Yeah.
I think really high quality teachers, I'd like to believe, are in almost all of K 12 classrooms. I think maybe that's one of their superpowers, that they can unravel that motivational energy, if you will, for each and every student because it's not one size fits all.
Yeah. And I'm not sure I've read, I hope that researchers will jump on this And maybe some people will listen to you and I and get an idea for a part of it that they want to jump on. If you're investigating what did we learn during the pandemic that we want to keep going, you're really asking what's the value added to in-person teaching versus online teaching. That's one of the aspects of it. And thinking broadly about that, I would love if we could be honest with ourselves as teachers about, yeah, we didn't think you could, but online you could do this and this and this just fine. You gotta make the mental shift. But here's what face-to-face is really good at and is irreplaceable, and have that be data and research based rather than intuitive and experience based.
Yeah, maybe there's a 2 by 2 table or
Yeah,
matrix out there that
yeah.
says, in these situations, nothing beats face-to-face instruction. If you have this type of student or this type of content or this type of student learning outcome or this type of skill is desired, we have, from a meta-analysis, face-to-face is superior in nearly every situation. However, if you have this type of student or this type of situation or this type of student learning outcome or this type of skill, we now know from the data and meta-analyses that online is superior. It's not one size fits all. It's you dial it up. And we know that some cars need one type of tune-up and another car needs another type of diagnostic.
Yep.
And we don't use the same. Some cars need tools based on English measurements and some cars need tools based on metric measurements.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't use the same tools on every car. That's not a very good analogy, but
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to get at.
Wouldn't that be cool and incredibly potentially useful for 4-year and community college and K-12 teachers? Because then it's more of a deliberate matching rather than an argument about no, online is better than in person or vice versa. It's much more intellectually honest, and an honest institution could then set up courses to match the best practices. So in our district, we got a lot of requests from parents saying, after COVID is over, for this and this reason, it would be great if your district continued to offer some remote learning opportunities. And that was a challenge because most of us, boy, the administrators are tired of everything, and as are the teachers, but they listened. And next year, they're trying a 1-year trial for some grades, some classes for a remote learning school. But what we don't have, as far as I know, and I don't know if anybody has this, is so you're going to set up a remote learning, say, high school. What classes, given the research, would you anticipate would work well? And which ones should you just say, no, sorry, we can't do that remotely because we know it won't work well? We can do that intuitively, and some of it's going to be done, but it's not based on research yet.
But someone has to do it and then collect data at the same time. And I can give you maybe 2 examples. So at Boise State, it always cracked me up when I heard about this, and this was before the pandemic. Students could take, they're called Bronco Fit. They used to be out of kinesiology. You could take, I think, a running course for credit, but it was online running. So you could take an online running course, but you recorded it all digitally.
Huh.
So you downloaded an app and you
Huh.
had accountability
Sure.
and you had to go and log it.
Huh. Okay.
And I suppose there's ways that you could cheat it, but you could take a 1-credit course.
Yeah.
The other example, so I serve currently as department chair for psychological science. And in fact, we just talked about it this week in a faculty meeting. And this is not the same as teaching a course, but in the fall, our faculty meetings used to all be face to face. We would gather in a room together and we would sit at a conference table and chat. And obviously now they're all Zoom, right? So we do the Brady Bunch thing and we get to see each other on a screen. So in the fall, what we're going to do is that we have a conference room that's been remodeled, relatively large space, lots of seating where people can sit away from one another. We're not sitting at a table. We're sitting at the perimeter of a room. It'll have one camera with microphones hanging from the ceiling, but we'll also give faculty members the option if they want to be remote. If they want to be distant, they can be either in their offices down the hall or at home or wherever. So we're going to try this flex option where if you're in the room with us in our conference room, You don't have to be on your laptop. You can just be looking at the camera and we're together. But if you don't want to be in the room, you'll have to be on a laptop. So it, and I think that'd be hard for K-12, and it's going to be hard for higher ed if we continue in the future with a flex option, meaning I'm going to offer a course. You can be online or you can be in the room with me. That takes a special skill set to develop a course like that.
And is that the high flex model, I believe?
It's the high flex model if you allow people to go switch at any time to any modality.
Right.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
High flex. Yeah.
In K-12, we're on a similar path. The adult conversations, the staff and teacher and administrator meetings are still mostly via Zoom, even though a lot of us are craving to get back together. The ease of virtual conferencing, I think, is winning. And there are definitely some super advantages of that. I end up working a lot with elementary vice principals, associate principals, and administrators. And if you've ever tried to pry yourself out of an elementary school where there's a bunch of little knee biters who really want your attention, it's really hard. And you lose travel time. And we always had to be super deliberate about how much time we took those people out of the building. They can now just go in their office, get on a Zoom meeting, and get off the Zoom meeting temporarily if they need to. So that's something that's not going to go away. So I think as far as lessons learned, maybe as adults, as teachers and administrators, we're learning we can get along without being physically present in the same room. We can get stuff done, even if that's our preference.
Okay, so Rob, I'm sorry, I have to ask you, in your world, knee biters is not considered pejorative. Is that correct?
Oh, maybe some people would. It's just something that my colleagues and I say. It's probably not super professional dialogue.
Okay, I love it. It's great. I will edit it out if you want, but
No,
I will leave it in if I can.
No, it's fine.
It is lovely. Yeah.
We can drive our comments. People can talk about whether knee biters should be used or not.
Oh my gosh. It's when college professors or university administrators use the word kids.
Yeah.
For students. I actually am not a fan of that. I'm okay with knee biters because I know what you mean. Short people who are small in stature.
Right.
I don't think you mean it as pejorative. No. You mean it as to indicate younger people. Love it.
Just height.
It's great.
Yeah.